tag.
Yeah, you did.
According to my watch, we still have another minute. That'd be my atomic clock. Yeah.
I don't know how many seconds is on that, but is he missing?
Oh,
Can't even. It's pretty salty, I tell you.
people spamming you again?
Okay, it's 5 o'clock. Let's call this meeting to order, and we'll have a roll call, please.
Director Hedges?
Here.
Director Johnston?
Here.
Director Finch?
Here.
Director Kilkey?
Here.
Chair Baggerly?
Here. Thank you. Would you all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Ready to begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment cards? No? Anybody in the audience wish to address the board as a public member? Seeing none, we will move
I'm
on.
surprised.
We'll move on to item 4, which is board officer elections. We do have to have an election every 4 years, I believe. Or is it 2 years? I forget. It's been so long since I looked it up. But we have it on the agenda, and we're going to do that tonight. The first we will do is the president of the board or the chair, and the board is able to just put a nomination forward for whoever they think the president should be. We'll start with that. Board members.
Nomination,
Okay.
Mr. Hedges.
Okay. Mr. Hedges has been nominated. Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, congratulations. That's it. Do we have a vice chair? So let's go with the second nomination for vice chair.
Nominate Jim.
Jim, are you willing to accept?
Yeah, I'll second for
Are there any other nominations for vice chair? You're it, Jim. Do we have a secretary too? I don't remember.
I don't
Secretary, treasurer.
That's you.
I don't think so. I don't think it is either.
Entertainment chairman.
Well, okay. I would just like to take a second before I turn it over to Richard to thank John Mundy, Cece Vandermeer, Jordan Keir, and wherever the attorney is. These people work really hard.
Did you say wherever or whoever?
Wherever he is. I don't know if he's coming tonight or not.
He's not coming tonight.
Okay, well, he'll have to get my thanks by watching the minutes or the video.
And I think the board should thank you for stepping in the absence of Dan.
Well, thank you. I'd like to thank the board as well for a lot of individual work that they do. I'd like to thank the people that come to this meeting and see us try to make it through the SIGMA process, and the viewers out there who are hopefully being informed about what's going on here. And lastly, I would like to thank a person who is probably, in my mind, the most judgmental person I've ever seen. That's William Ulrich, and that's all I have to say. Take over.
Well, before
No, you don't count. You, wasn't even close.
Give you an
Randy.
honorable mention, though. You're working on it, maybe next year.
I'd like to ditto what
Johnny said on you stepping in, Russ, because I know you didn't want to go into this after having done a tenure, and Dan was gung-ho to do it, and poof, he was gone. So thank you very much for stepping in the way you did.
Oh, you're welcome. It's,
Okay, well, thank you, Russ. You do a good job of keeping us all in line,
You
and
want to change
Ma-
change places?
we can do that next time.
Okay.
All right, the next item on the agenda is an overview of the groundwater sustainability plan requirements. We're going to have a presentation.
Yes, I'm going to give you a verbal overview of several areas within your agenda. There was a memorandum that I put together that talked about things I wanted to cover tonight. So, and then I need a little direction from the board as well, so that we know what we need to do, when we need to do it, and where we're going to go with it. So initially, I wanted to talk about a little bit about the activities and work requirement. I believe I sent by email, and if you haven't gotten it, let me know, the package that I submitted to the Department of Water Resources related to the grant application. And within that, I don't know if you had an opportunity to read it, there essentially is a scope of work. And a lot of this really kind of
Yeah.
follows what DWR is expecting. But initially, we do the designation of a groundwater sustainability plan manager, which was completed in the end of September. So we had to do that and provide that resolution as part of this application. The grant administration to be provided by the GSP manager, so that grant administration means that we'll be assuming it gets awarded, and if the board decides to accept it, it will mean there will be quarterly reporting, quarterly billing, and then interfacing with DWR on occasion if and when needed. Board workshops, within the proposal, I submitted 4 board workshops and 4 workshops dealing with our outreach and communication to the stakeholders in the community. Tonight is expected to be one of those board workshops. So it's not that we're going to have a lot of detail tonight, but I need some direction in some areas. And then the outreach and communication plan, I put together kind of a draft. The Upper Ventura River has actually put together a plan. It's been approved. We're plagiarizing their plan, and we're cutting out a lot that's in there because not sure it meets our needs. But and I did include that in the agenda, and you'll notice there's still references to Upper Ventura River. And the reason for that was I did this prior to going on vacation in October. And I didn't want to put a lot of time in it unless the board had some other idea where they wanted to go. But I would recommend that we finish up on the communications plan and get it adopted, and then that will be one of the submittals that will give the Department of Water Resources through the grant process. There will be data collection, there will be groundwater model update. We'll be looking at, we have to prepare information regarding the basin setting, the sustainable management criteria, identify any projects and management actions necessary to achieve sustainability in the basin. We'll be preparing a draft report, and there'll be processes along the way in these workshops that I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to provide where are we at and give that information to the board. And as part of the community workshops, we're going to need to provide them copies of technical memorandums, give them information about, the overview of the basin, what it's about, what we're doing, why we're doing it, those kind of things. And then there will be a draft report submitted not only to the board but as well to the community. And then there will be a final report presentation, and then a submittal to Department of Water Resources by the end of January 2022. So if there's a grant agreement and the board decides to accept that, there'll be an executed agreement, quarterly progress reports, and invoices, as I mentioned. We'll have to provide completion reports, our outreach and communication plan, presentation materials for many workshops that we have. Meeting summaries will also be necessary, so as part of our outreach efforts to community, we're going to need to summarize those meetings into some kind of minutes and provide an opportunity for the community and stakeholders to comment back to the agency, and then we can respond as well on their comments. And then any technical memorandums to stakeholders, interested parties, and the public and the Department of Water Resources will be provided as part of any submittal dealing with the grant. And then any update to the groundwater information that we have will also be submitted to the Department of Water Resources. I did provide within the grant proposal a schedule. They do ask for a schedule and match it to essentially your scope of work. It's proposed that there's four areas, I think, yeah, 4 areas: grant administration, stakeholder engagement and outreach, groundwater sustainability plan development, monitoring, assessment. And it's expected that some of that work essentially is starting now. As I see this as a workshop that kicks off us moving forward and getting a groundwater sustainability plan completed. I think, I don't know if I included this schedule with the agenda tonight. I didn't print all the, but it was in the email I sent to you. But again, I can resend any of this information if you need to see it. But the thought is that we would essentially start now getting this document together, and that we would be pretty much complete with everything by, let's see, I wanted to say it's late, I think October of 2021. Because we're gonna need to put a draft. Yeah, the draft and final completion reports will be done late October, and then we'll need to certainly have the board go through that, approve the final report, and then we'll do a submittal before the end of January of 2022.
John, I hope you're making sure that you are counting all of these hours that you're putting into this thing to be paid.
Well, I have I mentioned this last meeting. I'm not charging the board for the time I spent on this grant submittal. You didn't ask for it, but I think it's an opportunity for the agency to get some money. You may want to do it, you may not want to, but I think you got to have an opportunity to say yes or no. And so I wanted to get it done, and it's submitted, and we'll see what happens. We're not expecting to hear something back until probably March. So, but we've got to get busy on other things before we even hear about this. So,
Okay.
but related to that, Director Baggerly, I am now doing my invoices to categorize any time spent related to administrative activities or related to grant or the groundwater sustainability plan.
Thank you.
So I think on my last invoice showed that. So, okay. The second item on the memo that I put together was talk about website update. The Department of Water Resources wants to make sure, as part of our outreach to the community and to stakeholders, that we provide a web forum for people to find information and to dialogue, and they can ask questions. And so as part of that effort, we're going to need to develop, I would suggest use the existing website, but improve it so we can have a separate section that relates to groundwater sustainability planning. And Cece and I are going to sit down with the web developer person that you use, and we'll see what we can come up with as far as information. My goal is, at least what I'm thinking, is provide a website that's easy for people to get information. So, you know, here's where you can find the last meeting information, the agendas, any responses related to comments that have come in, anything the board's approved, and we'll give an overview of the basin on there as well. So people, it's an educational.
How would the board members feel about having an OBGMA email account so that people who wanted to contact any of the board members could contact russ.baggerly@obgma.com or whatever so that could be on the website as well. Anybody have a problem with that? It's not your personal email. It'd be one directly related to OBGMA.
And if that's set up, you'd have to have some way of accessing that and being able to download it to
That's what the
tablets or phones or
That's
whatever.
what the webmaster's for.
So,
And Upper Ventura River did that.
yeah.
Do we have a good webmaster, to use Russ's parlance?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, the other approach, and we'll explore these ideas, and I'll find out what maybe some of the costs are. You could have a separate website related to the communications and outreach efforts. But I think if we tie it into the existing, I mean, you could tie it in with a link into the existing website, but I want to make sure that whatever is done, either it's standalone or it's tied in the existing website, it's easy for people to access and get information.
It should just be tied in. It's
Yeah.
part of OBGMA.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, I mean, the front page should have the sustainability plan.
Right.
That's what we're doing, so there isn't much else to put on there.
Yeah. Well, I think, at least when I've opened up the very front page, it really is just kind of, it isn't really the home page. Is it? No, well, it's something a little,
I think that's a new government format.
yeah, so,
I mean,
but we'll look at it and make sure
There are new
and we
rules.
compliance with that as well, so.
And I've already talked to our web guy and told him that these things are necessary,
yeah.
and he's available.
But right now, I think you have 3 boxes.
There's 3 boxes, but there's also a top
Yeah.
drop down.
So I mean, I think to highlight it, we ought to have it as a box, or,
Sure.
I mean, it should be simple.
When you said 3
Whatever you-
boxes, the first thing I saw was the 3 desilting ponds. Those could be the
Yeah.
3 boxes.
Well, that's the way it is.
Yeah, we'll work toward it, make it, and what I'd like to do is get some draft layout, and I can just send it out and see if anybody has any other comments you want to provide.
How large of a email contact list do we have where we send meeting notifications to?
It's only about 20.
Yeah, so we're gonna have to expand that considerably.
Yes.
See, it shows up different.
Yeah.
I mean, technically, all the well operators should be notified.
Well, and I think that comment works into the next thing that I wanted to cover is your outreach planning and assistance. And there is, in this draft, this document, I think I put that in there, the stakeholder engagement plan.
Yes.
There is a list of suggested contacts. Agricultural well owners, domestic well owners, surface water users, municipal well operators, public water systems, mutual water companies, Ojai Water Conservation District, Upper Ventura River Groundwater Agency, Ventura River Watershed Council, City of Ojai. If there's any disadvantaged communities, I know there's a small area in the Ojai, apparently in the north, kind of east or something. There was a map that I got connected to with the Department of Water Resources, but it was like
Really?
700 people is what they were saying.
Wasn't it in Upper Ojai, though?
Yeah, it's Upper Ojai,
Yeah.
yeah.
So that's outside of us.
Yeah, which is outside, but, County of Ventura, City of San Buenaventura, Department of Fish and Fish and Wildlife, excuse me, State Water Resource Control Board, Regional Water Quality Control Board, National Marine Fisheries Service, Santa Barbara Channel Keepers, Surfrider, Friends of Ventura River, Department of Water Resources, and California Native American Tribes. So I don't know if that list is comfortable for the board. If we're missing some things, I'd like to know.
You pad it as best you can.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Do
thinking.
you have Upper Ventura River on there?
Yes,
Yeah, thanks.
because I think, a lot of it's going to be certainly interested water users from a public perspective, a public agency perspective. But I think we've got to balance that with some of those, I guess they call them NGOs nowadays, non-governmental organizations.
I'm sorry, did you have Forest Service on there?
I don't believe so.
They're an agency that we deal with.
Casitas has created a list like this recently, didn't they, within the last year?
They may have, but I created a list for this agency when we first became a groundwater sustainability agency. We had to do that,
And I think I looked at that,
yeah.
build that information up. So this is kind of a compilation of that information as well as just things off the top of my head.
One of the things I suggest we do with these organizations like the Regional Board, National Marine Fisheries, Channel Keeper, that are large organizations, is see if we can contact them and see who they would like this directed to, so that it doesn't go into a spam box somewhere and we find out in 2 years from now.
Yeah, good idea.
And they may have, several people they would like to have on the list, so.
Okay. Yeah, there's certainly going to have to be names, contacts, phone numbers, emails, those kind of things we'll have to gather. But this was something to start from, so I wanted to see if there was anything else the board thought that they would like to see.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty good list. I couldn't, from the previous list, I thought of the Friends of the River, but you have that on there.
Jordan, you want Cure Groundwater on it?
I believe we will be
Pretty
on
much
it and/or
around it anyway.
contributing authorship.
Yeah, we'll find a way to make sure you're kept up to date. Okay, so I think we've got a good start here. We'll start pulling more information together to get this better defined, and we'll work at that. Then there's the stakeholder engagement plan, and then which I'll need to continue to work on, and in deciding how stakeholders are going to be involved. And I think there's a couple approaches to that the board should consider. One, you can go through a whole process and actually have a stakeholder committee, a group of people that give you feedback through the process, or you could handle it. I mean, there could be 3 or 4 different ways, but I'm going to suggest 2. You could have a process where we pull together the workshops, we present information, we review technical documents with people, we give them a form for feedback and respond to their feedback, and then we come back to the board and let you know what's going on with that. And so where they don't actually have a committee or a voting voice, but they do have a voice from a standpoint of opportunity to attend the meetings and provide their feedback that way. So
So that's one, right? Or was
that's
that-
one. The second one would be
The committee.
use some kind of a committee form,
I think.
and that's
for
a lot
us-
more work, quite frankly.
I think for us, the former is the better way to go. Bring them in, get them. If it goes to a committee,
Yeah.
it has a chance of getting lost, I think, almost amongst the committee.
Well, and I think it's important, even if there's, only 4 workshops that we engage stakeholders in the community, they still have the opportunity to come to the board
Right.
and speak to you. So there's going to be plenty of opportunities.
And we're small, and we overlap heavily, and hopefully we know a lot of each other in some way, shape, or form. Maybe on completely different bullet points on this list, but still, we're all here in a very small geographical area compared to many.
Yeah, I agree. I think it just complicates it to bring in more people that are going to be doing something outside of the board. We are small, so I think between a committee workshop and our regular board meetings, I think we're going to have enough time to engage the public. I mean, if they're interested, there's no reason for them not to be able to come here. It's not very far to drive from.
I mean, they can also write letters, they can send
Yes.
emails. I mean, there's plenty of forums.
Well, I think the big thing is that where the state has a problem is particularly if we get a formal written comment on some technical work that we've done and we don't respond to it.
Yeah.
That's the thing that the state is not going to like. And if we don't respond to it, and honestly and try to deal with the issue. So I think that's where we're going to have to respond in a timely manner to find out whether the person or group making the comment is satisfied with the response or wants more information, so that we don't drag it out too long. We wind up with someone that feels like they've been ignored at the very end, and it just throws a wrench into it all.
Yeah.
Richard?
Go ahead.
Just John and Richard, Jordan, Do you think that DWR and the Sigma crew are going to allow us to develop a focus, and so that we don't have to deal with the garden club coming in and telling us what they think?
Well, everything, I was just going to speak to that. Everything that I've read related, the DWR has put together, they have a strong emphasis within the groundwater sustainability planning of getting out to the public and engaging them. But they're not telling you how to do that, okay? But they want you to define it, and they want you to proceed with it, and they want you to document it. And so we're going to have to provide good documentation on whatever we do. And I think they'll be satisfied that we did give the community an opportunity to be engaged and to comment.
Well, I do think that we ought to develop a focus statement for what our committee ought to be dealing with, and that's groundwater use, any surface water use, beneficial uses, and those kinds of things.
Yeah, and I would hope that if we're gonna do these workshops, each workshop is focused on a specific area
That'd
that
be
we're gonna
good.
deal with, whether it's saltwater intrusion or one of those things, but,
That one could
Yeah,
take some time.
yeah. But I think if we keep them focused, because if we try to cover everything in a workshop, you're right, it'll go all over the
It's
place.
all over.
You lose people, and they get tired and disinterested, because they want to have an opportunity to engage as well. And if you're standing there for 2 hours talking the whole time,
But don't get me wrong,
tune
it
out.
doesn't mean I don't want the garden club coming here and telling us what they think. They can.
okay? And as part of this process, I'm seeing that there's going to be a lot of work the next 2 years, and certainly not just from my standpoint or Jordan's, but, the board's going to have to be more engaged than maybe you've been in the past. We're going to have these workshops and regular meetings, and we're going to have to provide these opportunities for the public to comment. But I also see we're going to need some assistance in this outreach effort as well. I've been involved in workshop planning, presentations, meeting recordation, written responses to questions, website postings, all that. Quite frankly, I don't want to work full-time, okay?
Yeah.
But I see an opportunity here to hire someone and bring them in. We need to define what that scope of work is. We need to look at what kind of cost we're looking at. And I have some information. We've got a person that's interested in doing that for OBGMA. But I think we need to give you a better idea of how that's going to work and what it's going to cost you.
Well,
And, And so my thought is trying to bring you something at the January meeting.
that's good. I'd like us to continue thinking about our major premise that we need to convince DWR is a real entity, and that's the difference between the perched aquifers and the lower aquifers, and we need to figure out how we're going to get people to. Jordan, this is directed at you directly. If we need someone else to help you with that, if we need peer review of our reports or whatever, we need to make it ironclad and solid.
And I think right now, Jordan, I don't know if anybody's contacted you in regards to the lawsuits. I know that there's various hydrologists that have come in with the various groups that have looked at that, and I'm wondering, that could be a very easy thing, because I think in everybody's case that distinction is important. So it may be something that's being peer reviewed and you just need it commented because of the lawsuit.
Yeah, I think I think an important first step for a workshop would be to have one where we discuss how the basin operates.
Yes.
So that people can come in here and we can have a common understanding of the general nature of the basin, how it operates, what the various confined and unconfined areas are, and how they relate, how all that relates to overflow into the creek. And so that we have a foundation to start with. If we start out with creek flows and have no basis for where they come from or how they vary, we're just gonna get into arguments, so.
I think the term we're looking for is that we'd like to put our hydrogeologic conceptual model on the runway.
There you go.
Okay.
Exactly right.
You understand what that means?
Yes.
I mean, it's literally taking what we understand about the basin and putting it out there for all to see. Peers, public, laity, clergy, and everyone. Because the idea is that the more input we have, the better. And the more comments we have that are substantive, not based in a legal perspective, not really trying to argue anything but, hey, what do we know about it? Why do we know it? And what does it mean for the operation of the basin? Putting it out there in a workshop. It's the hydrogeologic conceptual model on the runway.
I think the model that was done in, 2014, is that the mod pool model?
2011.
11.
UBS name on it.
It has some very good graphics that if they were larger and you could really see where you're at on them. Those graphics by themselves with some explanation really give you a pretty good picture of at least what the modeler believes is happening in the basin. And I think they're pretty consistent with everything that's been done. But, I've gone through that in detail and it's does a pretty good job, if you sift through all the calculations and everything, of showing you what happens under various conditions in the various layers in the basin, which is, I think, the thing that's most difficult for people to understand, how these layers are interrelated. So I really do think that would be a good workshop that really for the whole board to see, so that we have a basis to start.
And we also have the literal decade of data
Yeah.
at high resolution since that model was
Right.
produced. And that will be very helpful to both anchor in reality future modeling efforts, but also check the forecasting that was done as part of that 2011 and
Yes.
the 2014 update.
Yeah.
And it's, within that time frame, we were effectively dealing with unprecedented drought. So worst case scenario on input, but not necessarily worst case scenarios in storage and discharge.
Yeah, that's one of the other things is the groundwater model update, which is, I assume that's what you're talking about. To take that model and update it with the current data and this worst case condition so that we have a current picture of what's going on in the basin. So I think that's a task that we should complete as soon as we can. I know we don't have a grant yet, but this may be something we want to go ahead with right away. I don't know what kind of a price tag would be to update it. It shouldn't be as much as the original cost of developing it, I wouldn't think.
I think one key component of that is the State Water Resources Control Board's model that includes part of this basin as well, or all of this basin. And so a lot of that updating work, I believe, is literally in the works. We might not have a complete deliverable until long after the groundwater sustainability plan is complete. But if we can coordinate with the authors of that updated model and their teams, that could certainly shorten some of those strings.
Yeah, I don't think we can wait for them. I think it's one of the first ingredients we need to really help the community understand how the basin works and help us understand how it works. So I think that's something we should do. And in conjunction with that, the other thing that I know Upper Ventura River, one of the tasks they're doing is trying to consolidate all the data into one database so that it's available for the modeling, but also for review by anyone that has comments about how we drew our conclusions. So consolidating that data, I don't know how big of a job it is, but I understand it includes the data you have, the data the county has, and then the state has data that may be in addition to what everyone else has.
It's effectively a database management system that is really a repository for all of that information.
And I think the OBGMA is ahead of that game in that the database, as we refer to it, the database, is really a starting point for that. Depending on what we want to make of that public and what should be made public and or added to with all those other data sets into one position is a component of both the grant application and the scope of work that John is describing tonight.
Yeah. But I think, there's certainly going to have to be some level of update. Somehow information's got to be looked at and massaged, because ultimately it'll help support the various analysis that Jordan's going to have to perform. And ultimately what's going to be part of the plan. So, he's going to be best to determine how we get that done.
I just want to remind you again that one of the specific and probably most problematic issues we're going to be dealing with is the groundwater dependent ecosystems.
Yes.
And we'll probably need a biologist to help us with that.
Well, I'd just like to get back to the modeling. In order to do an update, we have to have the data.
Yeah.
So we can't wait for a grant application to get, to do that. And I'm not really, the pumping data we have a pretty complete record, and it can be put into whatever form we would like it put into. We don't have to release the entire database for public's review. I'm talking more about groundwater levels on the various sites, and then any surface water data that we have, and water quality data that we have. That's the data we're going to need to do the modeling. I mean, the pumping data is probably the most complete of any of it.
Yeah, just to each of those components, the data loggers that we have in the various wells throughout the basin provide, like I say, nearly a decade of continuous, almost 90-minute to 3-hour intervals. We also have inflow parameters that are both precipitation side in the headwaters, but also some of the creek flows that are monitored by member agencies here. We also have outflow of surface water that we've been mapping on the latitude and longitude of daylighting and infiltrating groundwater along San Antonio Creek, and a quantification of flow that we're doing on a monthly basis at the point of exit of that surface water from the basin over a bedrock thaw veg within San Antonio Creek. We report on that monthly. There's also several newer gauges that have been put in and around the basin as part of the State Water Resources Control Board work, and quite a bit of other information that is out there. But I think those major parameters that you mentioned, Richard, are there upon which we will anchor the model in reality.
Yeah. You mentioned some time ago that several of the wells that have data loggers, the cable is broken.
There's one cable that is broken, but the logger remains intact and is still recording data. That's at Topa Topa on the far east end, there, well number 5. One data logger within the spreading grounds depth discrete monitoring well. Its battery ran out, so we're in the process of replacing some of those, and some of that is included in the grant application for dollars.
Richard, you mind if I ask Bruce a question?
Sure.
Bruce, would you mind stepping up to the microphone and answering some questions? It won't be too hard or difficult. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Has Upper Ventura River hired a biologist for the groundwater dependent ecosystems?
No.
Not yet, or you?
Yeah, we have not even discussed it yet as a board yet.
Okay. Well, this board and your board should probably stay in very close communication, because we might be able to share some resources and bring the cost down.
Mm-hmm. I would think that Scott Lewis would be the guy to go to, and I don't know how we access the information that he's put together.
I might have
you might have an insight to that.
an inside track
Yeah.
on that.
Okay. I mean, he seems the most knowledgeable about that, so
Okay.
I would think he'd be the one that we'd try to get the data that he's already put together, and
All right. Thanks, Bruce.
sure.
That's a good idea. Scott Lewis is a good biologist. He may be fisheries, but he also knows a lot about this area.
You have more questions?
No, that's it. Thanks.
Sure, you're welcome.
You can get back to your seat now.
And if I recall, I think it's a cash gen system think the county maintains that,
Yes,
and we participate in that.
yes.
And so we'll have certainly water quality data available.
Water level and
And water level and quality through that system. We're actually required, as part of the grant, to participate in that, but we're already doing that.
We already do it.
We've been doing it for a number of years. So, I've already really talked about overview of the grant requirements if awarded. So I don't know if there's anything else. I would ask the board, take a look at the stakeholder engagement plan. If you have any comments, just send me an email that says what you think we need to make sure we include. Again, I want to thank Upper Ventura River for allowing us to plagiarize their work, but it makes it a little easier to get this going. And we're going to certainly massage this to fit OBGMA's needs, because it certainly is not going to be the same as what they're doing.
Well, I think this all looks pretty good. Do you need us to action?
I don't need any actions tonight. I kind of want to get a feeling where you're at, and I think that's what we've got tonight.
What I'd like to do, though, is kind of go through a checklist of the things that we need to move on right away out of what you've presented to us. And I think one of the things is to, you said you were going to get a proposal on the public outreach plan.
Correct.
I'd like to see something on updating the groundwater model.
Yeah.
And then the other issue is we have two paths here we may take. One is with a grant, and the other was with our own money. So we're not going to know whether we have a grant until March, and as I told John, that's July in the state's timetable. We don't know for sure when we're going to find out whether we have it or not. So we're going to have to kind of proceed on the idea that hopefully if we decide we want it, we can get it. But in the meantime, we're going to need a few things that are going to have to be put into place. One of the first things in dealing with the grant administration is we're going to have a formal chart of accounts, and we're going to have an accountant do our accounting, because those grants are audited every quarter, and you have to submit an audit, and we're just not going to be able to get by with a general bookkeeper. So I think that's something we should take a look at, is getting some proposals to do the accounting. Cece's going to have a whole bunch of new stuff to do, so this is at least one thing that free up some of her time.
They'll make you pull your hair out. This is a good idea, CC. I'm telling you.
So I think there's plenty of accounting firms in Ojai that we could deal with someone local, so.
Yeah, the biggest issue, and this actually related to like the audit that you've had done, not a lot of companies want to do public agency work, especially for an agency this small.
That's true.
And so
There's no
it's,
one in Ojai.
yeah, not for an audit. But so I'm not sure where this accounting, because we also have to make sure the accounting meets the
State
GADSB, Government
Yeah.
Accounting Standards Board requirements. And so,
Well, I think there's several that
what
can
the
do
state
that,
wants,
so.
but we'll certainly
Audit's
look at
a
that.
different issue, but the accounting, I think we're going to have to do that.
Yeah.
Um,
Agreed.
The other thing is I think we're going to have to take a look at whether the board wants to pursue raising the pumping charges. Because if we don't get the grant, we don't have enough money to do a quarter of this. And that by itself is a long process. It requires public input.
Does it for the Sigma side?
I think that, well, it's not as complicated
It's not
as
as our old method.
as the old method, no. It
No.
doesn't require legislative approval, but it's more like raising water rates, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Peter will have to guide us in that,
Well,
but
how about we pay as we go until, as you said, June or July, and we know whether or not we get the
Could be in a
could be a no.
could be in a hole by then.
Yeah.
well, but I think the accounting piece of that, we need to get that set up right away, even if we do pay as we go now. So make sure because we can ask for retroactively for
Right.
costs that have been spent.
All of that stuff gets
We just need to make sure we track it properly.
gets to be part of the matching funds.
Well, I would suggest at least we have Peter give us a review what we have to do.
Okay.
And then we can decide where we're gonna go from there. But we have to know what authority we have and what the process is going to be in order to attempt to do that.
Sigma definitely gives you the authority to set rates and charges. I've personally felt comfortable that if you went through what they call the Prop 218 process, where you give all the appropriate notices, you do your cost of service analysis, you have your public hearings, and you present that information, I think at least it's one of those areas, if you follow that approach, you don't get challenged that you didn't follow it.
Yeah.
The other is it'll take 6 months to get that done.
Yeah.
So, but I agree, Peter needs to weigh in on this issue.
Well, excuse me, I just think we need a formal legal opinion
Yeah.
stating that we can do this as Russ mentioned. I think we can, but none of us are lawyers, so
Yeah.
we have a formal opinion, and then let's take a look at what the schedule is and what we have to do. I really don't think it'll take 6 months, but it's not as complicated as the previous one.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've done the cost of service model. We can just do an update, adding in the cost for Sigma. And that would be pretty easy to
Yeah.
get that updated.
Yeah,
So, and the rest of the work is just, if you have to do hearings and public notices and things like that, it just takes a while. Because once you send out a notice, and you can't have the hearing any earlier than 45 days after the notice has been sent. So that, you're almost
yeah,
2 months into it.
that's why
at
I
that
say
point.
we
Yeah.
have to get moving on that, because we run out of money and then we're finished.
So I'll work with Peter, and I'll get him to start working on that opinion for you.
The other thing is if we're going to receive this grant, or decide to accept the grant, that's a considerable amount of money that allows us to do, I think, a lot more turnkey work. It takes some of the load off of you and everyone else. So I think we ought to start looking at organizations that maybe be able to give us proposals to do significant parts of this if we do get the grant.
Which could include grant administration if you wanted to
Yes,
tie that all
yes.
together.
That's not an easy task.
And it needs to be done right.
Bruce knows that. Yeah, and unfortunately, you send in your audit and request for payment after you've already received the services, so you're stuck.
Well, and just like this grant proposal, Department of Water Resources does have their format that they want to have everything
Right.
structured a certain way when you make that submittal.
Yeah, and that's something we're going to have to weigh all along the way here, how much more effort that's going to take versus paying for it ourselves. So we have some time to think about it. Anyone else have anything that
So I'm sorry. You want us to just review the stakeholder engagement plan and?
Take a look at the stakeholder engagement plan. Certainly in your free time, read over the grant submittal.
Yeah.
Nothing's going to get changed on that, but at least it'll give you an idea of what we submitted. And if you think there's things that this wasn't as detailed as it could have been, and quite frankly, Department of Water Resources was actually pretty good about saying, we don't want a lot of detail. I mean, they didn't come out and say that, but they gave you an opportunity to either give them in detail or kind of a summary method, and we did the summary method.
Good.
So, but yeah, I think there's, as Director Hages pointed out tonight, if the grant is awarded, if it comes through and you decide to accept it, it's probably going to be a different approach in how we tackle this effort.
Okay. Renee, are you going over it?
What?
Are you going over the stakeholder engagement plan?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. Just wanted to know. Anything else, Richard?
anything else on this?
Renee was one of the ones that is the one that we've looking at helping us right now with stakeholder outreach. I do have a resume from her, and if I can certainly present that next month. I don't know if you want to get into a whole solicitation of proposals, but I think we're gonna do a lot of work, but it's not gonna be, every month. It's gonna be, probably twice a year over the next 2 years. But we still gotta get it prepared and put together, and get a plan put together, and ultimately the board's comfortable with that.
Bruce, how's Ventura River handling that?
The stakeholder engagement plan?
Yes.
We have a committee that is in charge of implementing the plan, and it's a three-member committee chaired by Larry Rose and Emily Ayala, and I are on it. So the board gave us kind of discretion to keep, put out updates, newsletter, contacts, things like that, but non-discretionary stuff, nothing, no opinions about what we're doing, just kind of factual stuff. So the committee is responsible for doing that. If it gets a more significant issue, then it goes back to the board for approval before we send it out to the public.
Do you have someone handling the record keeping and meeting minutes and,
Not so much. It's kind of casual.
okay,
I keep a track of all the contacts I have with people as part of my stakeholder engagement stuff, just to document who I talk to, meetings I attend, things like that. The other two members maybe aren't quite as conscientious, but I don't know.
And I'm going to suggest the board might want to consider at least a subcommittee related to outreach, and then as we move forward and we need to do it, if we don't have the time to meet with the board, we certainly would like to meet with a couple of board members, or at least through email or something, and say, hey, this is what we want to do. Are you okay with that? And, we need to get some direction early, but again, if we're outreaching 2 or 3 times a year at the most, we should be able to come to the board at a regular meeting and talk about these kind of things.
yeah, I guess I'm gonna have to have a better understanding of what this outreach is.
Well, and we need to put the scope together.
I might just make one more comment. I think one of the things you have to keep in mind is you've got to have something significant to share with the public.
Yes.
We haven't had that yet. We've had a couple of meetings, public meetings, where we invited stakeholders to come and no one shows up. So I think we're just starting now to get into the point where we're going to have some meat that we can discuss and some issues. And so that's where we are.
Yeah, that's one of my feelings. We don't have any products to be reviewed yet, so we're just developing the roadmap and the procedures for how we're gonna do this, but it's gonna be some time before we have any real products to put out there for public comment.
Yeah, I think early on, certainly the first meeting, as we mentioned earlier, would be giving an overview of the basin, and I think we could do that now. But beside that, we're like you guys. We don't have a lot of information to put out there yet.
Okay, anything else? We have a meeting scheduled for, what is that, Tuesday?
Next week, we really don't have anything, so I would suggest the chair, unless you really want to have that meeting, suggest the chair.
No, I don't.
Okay.
Anyone else have objection to canceling that?
The objection, but is there any kind of a report? I know this is a special meeting, but any, like on the level of the lake and how much we got out of this rain, if anything?
Just about to speak to that. I think what would be appropriate is if we just updated the website with the information on water levels and storage. And if CC posted that, we could circulate an email or letter to the board and interested parties that has been updated with the information that we can provide at that time.
I can tell you what the level of the lake is. It's at 41.4, which is very, very close to 100,000 acre feet. And the water's still coming in.
So why did Casitas change their little lake level webpage?
Don't ask me.
the other
It wasn't
one-
what I wanted.
The other one was so
Easy.
easy.
I know.
I couldn't find it.
You go to.
It's
I'll
got Santa
tell you.
Felicia and everything else.
Well, yeah, but all you have to do is press on the blue one marked Casitas.
Yeah.
And it takes you to the page, and it tells you everything you need to know.
Oh, you can go down further into that one page that has, okay,
Yeah.
I had the same problem.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, the new government mandated websites are not easy to use. The old ones were fine.
Oh, is that why?
Yeah. Yeah, ours is the same way. I mean,
Are we
it's
done?
hard to determine where you're going in that thing. All right, if that's it.
Well, then you want to have the meeting January 30th?
That'd be the regular
Yeah,
meeting.
we'll have our regular meeting.
Okay,
That sounds
If
good.
we need another one before that, we'll
okay.
let everyone know.
Thank you.
All right, we're adjourned at 5:55.
Great. Thank you.
I'm glad I didn't have to be here 2 nights in a row. When you guys took that off the agenda.